All right. Thanks everyone for joining our startup grind call. I'm gonna make basically, excited to have all you guys here. I'm gonna send a message so you see the chat box here right now. Be a quick welcome here. If at any time you guys have any questions you want to go over, feel free to submit them there. I think there's also some other question features you can use as well, but feel free to introduce yourselves, like get to know everybody else that's part of this startup grind community. And we're going to keep this pretty interactive too, so we'll give a quick introduction on our side, our group, do more of a fireside chat format with Elizabeth here, and then anytime you guys have questions throughout, we can build those into the chat, and also like have some dedicated time towards the end as well. So just for a quick background, Startup Grind, it's a global networking organization, basically the largest community of startups reaching 2 million entrepreneurs. It started out in Silicon Valley 10 years ago. Here's a 10-year shirt here. And yeah, now there's 500 different chapters around the world. And yeah, most of them are different cities around the globe. Some specialize in universities as well. And you just launched a new online platform as well for it's called the Startup Membership Program, with a little more access to other partners and VCs as well. And if you haven't seen our emails on that as well, we'll share more in the follow-up. But yeah, really excited. This is part of the, we had picked, or we had gotten introduced to Elizabeth beforehand anyways, and we're ready to, host her as a speaker. And then we saw like Startup Grind was hosting an SG Women Month with Silicon Valley Bank and Google for Startups, and it was just another perfect fit here. So excited to share the quick introduction bumper or intro video here about what Startup Grind has been doing and this annual tradition. And there's already events like this around the globe, and we really like doing in-person events, but one of the good things right now is that any of the startup chapters around the world, you can feel free to join the chapters in Africa or Asia or across, California, Midwest, wherever you want. Pretty much everyone's doing virtual events right now. So yeah, feel free to jump in and check out some of the other chapters as well. And yeah, with that, I'll give a quick introductory video here.
Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Leaders Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more who represent our community all around the world. This month's SG Women Month is proudly presented by Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank.
Perfect. And again, everyone here, any questions you have throughout, or any comments, introductions, if you want to share your LinkedIn and connect with other people, feel free to do that in the chat. And I'd like to invite Elizabeth up for an introduction. I know you have a great background working on your own company, Olaris, and also part of the World Economic Forum. We'd love to have you share a quick introduction to yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you, Jason, and everybody at Startup Grind for having me today, and for everybody for joining. I'm looking forward for this to be, super fun, chill, and interactive conversation. A little bit about my background, and I think we'll probably get into it more. So I'm the CEO and founder of Olaris, a precision medicine company that is developing in vitro diagnostics to help figure out which drug will actually work for which patient. Started the company 6 years ago as a spin out of my PhD at Harvard. As Jason said, I also, do lots of other things in the precision medicine space. I would say, I kind of eat, live, and breathe precision medicine, and fortunate to be co-chair for the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Biotechnology. I also sit on some steering committees for precision medicine. I was recently elected to the board of directors for the Personalized Medicine Coalition. And I don't know, I got a dog named Pythagoras, and he likely might interrupt us later, so I apologize ahead of time for that.
Sounds good. Yeah, and so just for those that aren't as familiar with the space, like what is precision medicine and the personalized medicine that you guys are involved in?
Yeah, so precision medicine is moving away from sort of a one-size-fits-all approach that is sort of how we unfortunately treat a lot of patients these days, and trying to sort of tailor those therapies for the individual. So there are swimming around in you and I things called biomarkers. And so these are biological markers. They could be DNA, RNA, proteins, or metabolites. And these biomarkers sort of correlate with particular disease or phenotype, for example, like drug responsiveness. And so there's this whole burgeoning field of precision medicine where we're trying to sort of use these biomarkers to improve how we diagnose and how we treat patients. Biomarkers can be single entities like a genetic mutation. So if you take like Huntington's disease as an example, there's a particular mutation. It's actually like a repeat of some DNA bases that if you have that, it's a pretty good indication that you're likely to develop Huntington's disease. There are other biomarkers that are sort of panels of things that can help kind of make predictions. So one very well-known one is for breast cancer patients. There's this Oncotype DX panel that measures 21 gene levels, and based off of the expression of those levels, it can sort of predict, the likelihood of recurrence and thus sort of the aggressiveness of many cancers. So those examples I gave you are genetic biomarkers. And while I am a fan of sequencing, I think that it's fair to say that genomics is not going to be the full answer. If you think of all the different factors that can influence, whether you get a disease or whether, a particular drug is going to work for you, it's not just your genetics that will determine that. There's your environment, your microbiome, what you eat, what you're exposed to, what other drugs you might be taking on. And so what our company does is actually measures a unique class of biomarkers called metabolites. And these are the things that are sort of downstream of the genome, but also they get influenced by all those other things, by your microbiome, by your diet, by your environment, sort of globally. And so, we use those metabolites as like a readout to figure out what's going on inside of patients, so that then we can translate these into diagnostic tools to hopefully empower patients and physicians to design optimal treatments. And that's for cancer, that's for neurodegenerative diseases. It's broadly for all different therapeutic areas.
So what are some of, or you just touched on a couple of them, but yeah, so, what are some of the areas you guys are looking into for more of this personalized application?
Yeah, so, the core technology that Olaris uses is this metabolomics-based profiling system that was part of my PhD studies. And we've combined it and married it together with machine learning or AI to be able to pull out these signatures. So the core technology that we do is agnostic to disease or drug. However, I'm not arrogant or naive enough to think that it will work for every case, right? So there will be certain cases where it works and certain cases where, maybe we don't add that much value. But where we focus to date is sort of broadly across some of the big heavy hitters out there. Cancer, we're working a lot in breast cancer. Our lead product that we're likely to commercialize is going to be focused on metastatic breast cancer, where unfortunately patients get like one chance to pick the right drug in order to sort of beat the disease. And so, getting it right is honestly life or death. And then we're also working in Parkinson's disease and other neurodegenerations, and we're also working in immune response and looking to get into sort of other areas as well. We were actually just contracted to start to look at projects outside of this earth, and looking at things like space osteoporosis and things like that. So there's a broad applicability of our platform out there.
Right. So when you bring something like this into whatever treatment, or if you're talking in the cancer space, for example, you know, what was the standard beforehand? Is it just doctors, you know, own history and making recommendations, or is there some other, you know, standard formula they used before to figure out what medicine to give a patient?
Yeah, so we've actually come quite a long way in how we treat patients. So I want people to feel like, you know, optimistic and excited about how we
Right.
do it. Like if you take breast cancer as an example, like just 50 years ago, the standard of care for having like a lump on your breast, malignant or not, was like a radical mastectomy. So we were like grossly mutilating, you know, women's bodies. And we have moved from that to first chemotherapy, which is just sort of systemic agents that stop cancer cells from dividing. They also will stop, you know, your normal cells from dividing, and that's why they have a lot of those toxicity profiles that we all know and have seen when we see someone go through chemotherapy treatment. And then cancer treatment evolved to be more targeted therapies where they have sort of taken diseases like breast cancer, for example, and split it up, right? So what type of breast cancer is it, right? Is it ones that are driven and overexpress the estrogen receptor? So the estrogen receptor is really key for that tumor to kind of like keep growing and dividing. And if that's the case, there's this whole arsenal of drugs that a doctor can sort of choose from. And if it's not that, you know, and then it happens to overexpress a different molecule like this compound called HER2, human epidermal growth factor, if that's overexpressed on a particular tumor patient's tumor, then there's a different class of molecules that doctors can sort of choose from. So we've gone sort of far in being able to, you know, just broadly either do some gross surgery or just, you know, systemic poison, to starting to tailor it. But we need to go further, right? Because
Right.
even within those subdivisions, you know, things don't work perfectly. So metastatic breast cancer, for example, is again where Olaris is working. And the standard of care for anybody who has hormone receptor positive, so they overexpress an estrogen receptor or progesterone receptor, is to get one of these, a drug that belongs to a class of inhibitors called CDK4/6 inhibitors. And there are 3 of them on the market. You will see advertisements for them all over the place. Ibrance, Kisqali, and Verenzio, made by Pfizer, Novartis, and Eli Lilly, respectively. And these drugs are pretty good. You know, they've shown dramatic improvement in what's called progression-free survival, so living, you know, without symptoms longer. But unfortunately, the drugs don't work for everybody. It's well known that sort of 20% or 1 out of every 5 women that gets this drug, you know, won't be helped. And essentially, you know, that leads to very poor prognosis for those individuals. And right now, figuring out who are those responders, the people that will do well on a CDK4/6, and those that are not, is largely guesswork. And so there's lots of efforts, clinicians, innovators, you know, academics coming together to try to actually even fine tune this further so that we can, you know, again, optimize drug treatments.
Right. That's great. So are the end drug companies themselves thinking of you as a partner, or like who are the major player, you know, between the doctors and the patients and the healthcare providers? Like, who do you deal with on a day-to-day basis to push this forward?
All of the above is the is
Right.
the short answer there. But you know, maybe the way to think about it is like, so I think of the way I think is like, who is Olaris kind of doing battle with, and then who are we helping? So who we're battling, I think, is uncertainty, right? And that is uncertainty for all the different stakeholders across healthcare: patients, physicians, payers, and pharma. Every single one of those individuals wants either their drug or the drug they're taking or the drug that they're giving or the drug that they're paying for to work. And so Olaris actually, I think, is fortunate to have a product that can actually unite all of these people that are sometimes not incentivized in the same way to move forward to deliver sort of optimal care. So, we work with physicians to get access to patient samples, to demonstrate our technology can work. We talk to patients to make sure that our technology would add value and it would help improve their lives. We talk to payers to make sure that they understand how our tech, can fit into their sort of treatment formulas and things like that. And then, of course, we work with biopharma so that, as they're making these drugs, that they want to get out to people, that our type of technology can sort of be embedded with them as they move forward.
And then you said, like originally you had started this during your PhD program. Did you always have the plan of turning it into a startup and a company, or what was the process like turning it from research into a business?
Zero idea or inclination that I would start a company. So, we just celebrated our 6th birthday, and it always causes me to sort of, reflect and have these moments of wow, it's crazy that we're here right now. So maybe taking sort of a step back, I have always wanted to cure cancer, right? That has been, I would say, a motivating factor for me since I was a young girl. I think, Jason, you know this, and my brother had cancer when we were kids. He's fine now, but he had a rare form of adrenal cancer called neuroblastoma, and for 2 years, my family lived in Boston Children's Hospital. And, the way that I thought about it then, and I still think about it now, is that, if you take a wet sponge and you put a stone on it, liquid will force out. That's essentially the same thing that was happening to my brother. Was a tumor was pressing against his adrenal gland, causing, metabolites and all these different molecules to be pushed out and just completely, disrupting his normal bodily function. And so, I can remember to the day that, he was diagnosed for a while and was trying to figure out why is he not eating? What's going on? This and that. And then, my parents brought him in to Boston Children's, was diagnosed. And then we kind of set up semi-home there for the next 2 years. And, it was a scary experience. Even I was in kindergarten, right? And my brother was in first grade. And even though they did their best to sort of shield me, and my younger brother from that, we could tell how serious it was. And so I used to beg the doctors to, fix him, just make my brother better. And I was told, and it was true, that they were doing everything that they could. And, I should just pray and hope that he got better. And good Lord, I did. But I was also sort of dissatisfied that we couldn't just figure out what was wrong with him, and just get him the medicine that would make him better and stop giving him medicine that will make him sick. And so, it was in that moment that I think my career was sort of set in stone of trying to develop technologies to understand cancer, and broadly other diseases so that we could sort of solve these treatment problems. So I have spent, I think, quite honestly, the majority of my waking life thinking about cancer. Even as a kid,
Right.
as messed up as this will sound, I was into cancer, right? So I would go to the library, read journal articles. I had knew what oncogenes were before I really even knew what genes were, right? Just really threw myself into the material and then started working in research labs. And I thought that was the way that you would cure cancer or cure diseases is, in the lab. And that is definitely still a big component of it. But, fast forwarding now, several years, when I finished my PhD at Harvard, and I had developed this core technology that I truly believed could help, patients like my brother and patients in other disease areas. I didn't want it to just sit in the lab. I wanted to make sure, and actually felt the responsibility that I had to get it out to people. And so, blessed with perhaps a little bit of naivety, because I didn't really know what biotech was and had very little connections in this space, if any, I decided to start a company. And it was certainly not easy, but we're still here 6 years later, and I'm very proud of that.
And obviously, yeah, you have a personal story around this. You're really passionate about this space, and sounds like you always have been. When you turned it into a company, how did you find the other people that were as passionate as you were to join in and create a startup?
That's a great question, and something that's really important, I think, when you're starting something and when you're growing something, the people that you bring into this are actually what's going to make you sort of successful. And so, you know, as I've grown and Olaris has grown, sort of, I realize, you know, it's my job to move our science and technology forward, but as a CEO, it's also my job to, you know, create a good culture and curate our team so that like we are all operating at a fast clip and sort of aligned in our mission. And so actually early on in Olaris, we set, you know, our core values, and it might seem silly to do for a company, you know, that's quite small. Right now we have like 10 full-time employees, but like we did it because I think it helps figure out and lets you find those people that are going to share that passion and that mission with you. And so, you know, Olaris's core values are threefold. One, you know, we are and will always be first and foremost committed to science. That is who we answer to. I think, you know, you see all kinds of things out there in the world, and like, you know, we're doing this because we want to develop things that work. And so making sure that our science is of the highest caliber is the first thing that we strive to do. And then second is that we always strive to be better. You know, I think everybody on my team is a rock star, but we're all humble enough that realize we can get better, or there's areas that we can improve on as individuals, you know, or as a company. And we constantly ask, like, what else could we be doing? You know, we have staff meetings every Thursday or every other Thursday. Tomorrow we have a staff meeting, and the way I end staff meeting is always like, what else? What else should we be doing? And then third, and maybe to your original question, is we are committed to what we call revolutionary impact. There are millions of jobs out there, and jobs that probably pay better than Olaris and are less stressful for Olaris. But why are you here? Into something that I ask all of my employees. Like, I'm here because of my brother and because of other, you know, patients that we want to kind of help. And literally in our handbook, I ask everybody to think about their why, and, you know, why they're putting in the work and why they're doing that. And I think by instilling that into your company and into your culture, it's going to help you find the people that are in this for the right reasons with you.
Definitely. Yeah, that's really important. And no, it sounds like you already, you know, you found that group of people that's all working on, I guess, the same mission that you set out on day one.
We have a great team. Like,
yeah.
I know everybody says like they have like the dream team, but like I really feel so lucky and constantly inspired by the team.
And or did the direction of the company pretty much stay the same throughout so far, or have you changed your model at all, like over the last several years?
Yeah, I'm proud to say that we're doing now what I wanted to be doing, you know, 6 years ago. So, you know, I will be quite honest with you, and I think that's, you know, a thing you'll get with me is transparency. Is, you know, being a first-time female young scientist CEO is a challenge, right? And so getting the resources needed to do what we wanted to do, you know, didn't happen overnight. So we've had to sort of, you know, be scrappy, figure out ways to kind of get to an inflection point, showcase, you know, that our tech works, or we have, you know, the chops to do X, Y, and Z. And it's been sort of a building process. But the central thesis of Olaris is and remains, you know, to develop and to use our technology to help solve this drug treatment problem.
Yeah, and we actually have our first audience question here. Again, if anybody has additional ones, you can ask them throughout in the chat. But yeah, from Ali. So a great mission. How do you take your research technology to industry, and how do you go from an academic environment, or what was the transition like from an academic environment to being the founder?
Yeah, great question. So thank you for asking it. And you know, it's not easy. So you know, academia and industry are like sometimes pitted against each other, and that like there used to be, and I think it's changing a little bit, that, you know, academia was the only place that you could do sort of pure, unalterated sort of science, and that anything in industry was sort of like motivated, you know, by money. And, you know, well, yes, you're a company and an industry, and, you know, you do have to, you know, eventually make a profit, or have a product that people will pay for. The motivations, I would say, are the same, right? And if anything, you know, I've found that in biotech, especially, small biotech where you sort of live and breathe by your data, that the opportunity to do great science is there, right? Like, you only get funding if you prove X, Y, and Z. And when, you know, and you only do it if you've done it thoughtfully, because otherwise some VC is going to say, come back to us when you've done, you know, this control, or what about that? So it like really forces you to like focus your science and to get it like on point. So I think, you know, there's opportunities to transition from academia to industry. And I encourage, like, you know, my academic compatriots, everybody, I used to be the lab rat that was in there until like 3 a.m, you know, doing experiments, to think more about industry and entrepreneurship, because there's so much that you can do out there. You know, I think the differences I would say are pace, you know, like you just operate at a really fast clip, in especially a startup, right? Like, there's, you know, not a lot of room for mistake and runway that allows that. So you have to sort of, you know, focus and move forward. There are also just like resources out there that, you know, Olaris took advantage of, and I encourage other people to take advantage of, that can help people, you know, in academia start to get the skill sets, the language needed, to translate, you know, into the business setting. So, you know, I'll just say like the incubators out there now, like there's a whole sort of industry of incubators, but like Harvard Life Lab has one, or there's Lab Central or Alexandria Launch Labs. All of these Olaris has done a little sojourn for, where you can go and like rent a bench and try out an idea, you know, and somewhat low capital. It still costs some money to be able to start to kind of move from just doing experiments in a lab to experiments designed, you know, with a business model in play.
Right. Yeah, and then how have you seen, so like, or whether either in the Olaris role or, you know, in any of the other organizations you're involved in, I guess, how has the industry reacted to, you know, like pre-COVID and where it is now in terms of what everyone is looking for in their developments and partnerships for the future from here?
Yeah, excellent point. And, you know, I think COVID-19 has certainly pressure tested a lot of things for all of us, maybe everything. And, you know, I think there's no better time to work in biotech than right now. You know, so I'm like super dork, and I keep fortune cookies that I find like the messages particularly meaningful, and actually like pinned on my corkboard, like right here in front of you, is one that says, the great and glorious masterpiece of, should say, woman, is how to live with purpose. And, you know, in this COVID-19 crisis, I just feel so grateful that I get to wake up every day on work on something that gives me meaning and gives me purpose. And I think, you know, we're seeing such a rallying throughout biotech and also just science in general, of people that are taking all of their knowledge and throwing everything they can at it. Like, I'm so impressed how quickly, you know, we've been able to mobilize, you know, different sectors to kind of come together. This emergency use authorization of the FDA is usually a quite slow moving thing, and they have been able to sort of respond to this crisis, you know, to come together, to get all these diagnostic products that we need out to people. And we're seeing that in other areas as well. You know, like, we know so much about the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is, you know, what causes COVID-19. We know what it looks like. We know its structure. We know how it gets into your cells. So it's quite, I would say, you know, an inspiring time to be a scientist, but on the backdrop of this huge, you know, pandemic and tragedy that we're all working against to try to mitigate as best one can.
Right. Yeah. No, and obviously, like, it's been amazing to see all the innovation that's come out of it and try to help, you know, all the tragedy, sort of, or I mean, everything from like, you know, in the drugs and diagnostics themselves, to even like, seen a lot of innovation in, you know, even in like cleaning hospital, or faster ways to clean hospitals and other facilities. And yeah, it's been, you know, great to see all the startups sort of making their way with the other corporations to help in any way that people can.
Yeah, it's been cool.
Yeah, so how did you get involved with the Economic Forum?
Let me think. So the World Economic Forum is a crazy and amazing organization, and it's like a little bit of an onion. I keep learning new things as I get involved with it, but they're basically a convener where they bring together different folks, business leaders, scientists, philanthropists, artists, and then throw everybody in a room or rooms and kind of see what happens as a little bit of their thesis. I think that they probably articulated a little bit better. But I don't remember, maybe in 2016, I was fortunate enough to be invited to go to the annual meeting in Davos for the forum. I was recognized as this new champion to reboot healthcare. I had started Olaris 2 years later and, was actively speaking out on the need to sort of move away from stepwise medicine to tailoring it to the individual and just, what waste was existing in the healthcare place because we weren't operating like that. And so, yeah, they invited me to go to Davos, and I would say, this is probably a very bratty thing, but I was like terrified. They sent me some like video of other people who had given talks at Davos, and it was, all these gentlemen in nice suits talking about like business terms that at the time I had no idea sort of what they were, and I just thought like, oh my God, I can't go. Like I'll embarrass myself, so much. But got the courage to go and gave a talk that was biomarkers are the DeLorean for personalized medicine. And I wore like a Marty McFly hat, and I talked about how like biomarkers, from past patients are like the DeLorean helping us treat present patients, and biomarkers for right now will help us in the future. And made these hopefully fun allegories. I don't know. I think it was okay received. But also just got to see like, different, how different stakeholders in the world come together and how things kind of get done. And yeah, it was a great opportunity. And there was, it taught me something really important, I will say as well. So I'm actually, you might not know this, but quite shy. I if you met me in college or in grad school, like I would always sit in like the last row in the classroom with some like oversized like hoodie and just like as soon as class was over, like peace out and run back to lab, and just get my work done. And it wasn't really, Davos was a pivotal moment because I was involved in, one of these sort of big stakeholder conversations with lots of different political leaders, one who is very well known right now. And they were all talking about cancer and how they were going to cure cancer and how they were going to do this by sequencing tumors. And, some of the biggest and most powerful people in the room were like nodding their head, very aggressively. And I just was like, looking around like, what's going on? Like, we've been sequencing tumors for forever. It's not as easy as these people are making it seem. And so shot up my hand and kind of had a blackout moment where I just like regurgitated, what I just kind of told you, but laced in with, more work from my studies that said like, look, fan of sequencing, but like, let me tell you, it's a little bit more complicated and we don't understand how genes interact and driver mutations and passenger mutations and just like, blah, spewed all this information. And I was quite sure I would probably get kicked out, but they actually recognized that, and then they made me co-chair of different councils and have continued to work there. So, it taught me, and I tell other people, like, you got probably some knowledge in there that is worth sharing with other people, and it's your responsibility to share it. So even though if it might be uncomfortable, as it was for me and still is for me, like, there's almost like a duty bound, to share that.
Yeah, and obviously, no, it's an impressive group, and yeah, especially, it's interesting, like, you said you were a shy person, and now, now you're up at the World Economic Forum, you're doing other speaking engagements, and sort of, it's something you're really passionate about, so I guess maybe that makes it easier to talk about.
Yeah, well, I think I've learned too, just over the years, like great science is not going to be the only thing that like, will make precision medicine a reality if we take that as an example. There's
Right.
so many other bits and pieces that have to come together. And a lot of that is like educating people, educating, political leaders about what policies exist now. Are they working? Are they not working? Where's room for improvement? And then educating like you and my dad and my mom and my uncle Paul of like how medicine works and what I'm working on and how it can improve their lives and things like that. So I learned, and again had to get over any anxiety that I had, that like if you want to do this and you want to have the impact that you think you do, like girl, you're gonna need to step up. And so yeah, that's I guess part of the gig.
Right. Yeah, and then so I guess currently now, or in your role, yeah, as CEO of Olaris, like where do you spend more of your time? Is it in the lab with the scientists? Is it on like, fundraising and getting funds into the business and grants and other aspects on that side, or doing more speaking engagements? Yeah, how does it break down there?
I'm gonna like repeat my previous answer, all of the above.
Right.
Yeah, it's split and it changes, right? So, I'm not in the lab anymore. We have great scientists, that are like leading our lab-based efforts, but very much still involved in, analyzing the data, thinking about sort of next steps and how we, again, holding to our first core value, committed to science. How do we make sure that we're, doing the best science, holding us to the most rigorous standards, and then also improving, so deeply involved in every day, every, part about sort of the science and where it is. But yeah, also driving business, jump from science meeting to a VC pitch, to, talking to policymakers about, potential reform for different areas. And so that is the CEO gig, I think, especially of a startup.
Right. And that sort of ties into one of the audience questions here from Al. Basically, it was around how challenging it is to be a spokesperson and champion for women founders and CEOs, and balance that with the Olaris and science portion of it. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, like, you're stepping up as a role model here. Like, do you see yourself as like a champion for female founders, or it's just you're focused on like running your company and hoping other people can follow on your footsteps?
Well, I think that there is a need to showcase more like women leaders and women founders and things like
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah.
I abide by the principle, if you can see it, you can be it. And so, Olaris is still just starting on its journey. Like, I hope, we transform
Right.
the world, and that's, the what I tell myself every day. But, still getting to here is a big step. And I want other young females or females to like, learn what they can from my example and hopefully do even better, So it is important to me, to support other women in science, other women entrepreneurs, because frankly, like I've been dismissed from my gender. Even now, I'm in conversations where like sometimes it just like it hurts, that like if I was a dude, this wouldn't be a situation, And so taking the time to meet with, mentor, network, be accessible, is important to me. It's tiring, and I mean, I'm as a CEO, you're pulled in 2 million directions all at the same time. But it is important. And, I think just like a stat that like burns in my head, I think it's like 2% of venture dollars, or maybe 2.8 last year, went to female founding companies, or companies with female founders. If you have a female and a male co-founder, it jumps up to 11%. But what that suggests is that 85% of all venture dollars, go to male-led companies. And boys have great ideas too, but so do females, right? You know,
Of course,
and
yeah.
so, yeah, I think doing what we can to talk about that and bring it to the forefront is important.
Definitely, and I think yeah, that's part of or why we're doing the or every year, yeah, Startup Grind does the SG Women Month. Obviously we highlight female entrepreneurs, and it's probably 50-50 in our chapter so far on our events. But yeah, I mean, I think it is important, and obviously there's still a big discrepancy that yeah, that we need to change here. So I'm glad you're like taking an active role in helping move the conversation forward.
Thanks.
Um, yeah, let's see. Okay. Yeah, so we got that question. Basically, yeah, so what other trends do you see in the you talked about your involvement in the precision medicine and personalized medicine space. So where do you see, over the next few years, like some of these trends going in the future medicine?
Yeah, great question. I mean, obviously, I think biomarkers and diagnostics are going to kind of get their chance in the sun. I think that the current system that we have, where we pay hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars for treatments that only work in fractions of the patients, is simply not sustainable. And so that we're going to see sort of demand from everybody to know for any indication, for neuro, for autoimmune disease, for cancer, who are the patients that are going to benefit from these drugs versus not. The guesswork here, I think, should be removed. And the thing to be excited about is that it can. Like, we already have all the omic technology needed to develop these biomarkers of response. We can do the sequencing, we can do the proteomics, we can do the metabolomics. We simply need to incentivize and create opportunities so that we can do the proper experiments, right? So that we can pull out those insights and then kind of commercialize them. So I think we're gonna see a lot more biomarkers in the future. I mean, I think there's gonna be more efforts too around, I'm a big champion of what's called real world evidence. Like these drugs that come to market sound all very shiny and sexy because they were in a very controlled clinical trial setting, but then when they get exposed to sort of the masses, they don't always work again the way that we hope so. So sort of demanding and setting up additional sort of real world evidence requirements in the drug process is something I strongly advocate for. And also just education. I think that like we're gonna get more, and we already are, like as data becomes more accessible, we're gonna have more tech savvy and sort of more of an appetite for consumers, patients, providers, whatever, to take ownership in their own healthcare. And so we'll see all of these things kind of blend together.
It sounds exciting. Yeah, and so where, I guess, yeah, in order for that, or yeah, to move everything in that direction, what do you see as some of the biggest obstacles for companies to push that agenda forward?
Yeah, I mean, it takes time and money, I would say, right? So like many things. And so, you need significant capital to fund these studies. And then these studies are sort of longitudinal sort of studies. So they're going to, even starting today, if we wanted to figure out response for a particular area, you have to make use of the existing patients, some that will do well and some that won't do well. And then you can, identify that signature, and then you have to validate it. So there's a wheel that can start turning to improve this, but it's going to take, time and money to get there. And for that wheel to kind of get kicked off, then there has to be ROI, return on investment, at the end of this. And so there are challenges in the diagnostic space around getting reimbursed, properly for this innovation. Unfortunately, while drugs can get reimbursed, for, as I said, upwards of thousands or hundreds of thousands, if not millions, it's changing now, but previously diagnostics used to get reimbursed sort of for the benchtop chemistry required to run that assay. And so even though, biomarkers drive 70% of decisions made by US physicians, they weren't being sort of rewarded for that sort of important piece of information that they're adding. And so, going in and starting a diagnostic company is a challenge, because investors, if they have $1 to spend and they put it in a therapeutic company, they know it can bring a 10x, 20x, whatever return. A diagnostic company, there aren't as many clear examples of that happening. And so you really have to, showcase the business opportunity here. And again, try to align all those stakeholders I talked about at the beginning so that we can start on this path to make these products available.
Right. And do you think that's obviously through COVID-19, diagnostics has been an essential part of fighting and preventing that aspect. So do you think any of that mindset is going to change, in the near future?
I do. I'm very hopeful. I think, you never heard the word diagnostics, and now we almost don't go a day talking about diagnostics and testing, in mainstream media and even just talking about it at home and things like that. So I think we'll see a step change here, because people are realizing just how important, testing is. It sets the stage of what's going to follow next. And, even using COVID-19 as an example where precision or personalized medicine is necessary, for the 20% of patients, that have the acute reaction and find themselves hospitalized, we're just throwing whatever we can at patients, right? We're giving some people convalescent antibody treatment, some people remdesivir, other things happening. There's such an opportunity here to tailor this, for the individuals to have improved outcomes, but also mitigate against a lot of the adverse effects as your body kind of sets off this crazy autoimmune reaction to kind of fight the disease. So, I think in general, this has highlighted the importance of diagnostics. And then as we get through it, the role of biomarkers and diagnostics, I think, is going to continue to be important.
Then, we have a couple more audience questions coming in. So from Ali, how do you balance commercial and investor interest with the innovative potential? So basically balancing all the stakeholders that you have in your company.
Yeah, good question. And, I think the way that we think about it, or I think about it, is we're a company, right? So we're trying to do important work that I truly believe in every, GCAT base pair of my DNA will change the world and change the world for good. But we're also a company, and I only get to do that meaningful work if I can showcase a profit. So it's finding a balance and a line that allows you to do that great science and meaningful work, that you've also sort of coupled it with a business model that kind of makes sense. And so Olaris, we pursue our science and our business model hand in hand, so that we get to do this and develop sort of these products. If there are other things that might not have the commercial opportunity that we are going after, and don't be a for-profit company, go be a nonprofit. There's lots of different ways that you can sort of do things. I think, again, for Olaris, for one of our first products in this metastatic breast cancer space, the drugs cost upwards of $200,000. The lead drug, there was $5 billion in the marketplace last year of sales of this drug. 20% is wasted, which means there's $1 billion of ineffective drugs sort of out there. If Olaris can not only improve outcomes by saving the precious time for those patients on going on an ineffective drug, but also save people the money that's associated with this as well, then there's an opportunity for us to make a business. So it's finding ways to blend, I think, the science and the business together. I hope that answers it.
That was a great. And then, another question from Cynthia, what is your creative process like to arrive at what to study next and move your experiments forward?
As you can maybe see, I have a chalkboard on the back of my wall behind me, and then this wall over here is a whiteboard. So I'm a very visual person, and so there is a lot of creativity that goes into as we think through our data and what is it telling us and what does it mean as that. But we run it through like a rubric. It's like a decision matrix. You know, there are endless opportunities there, but which ones can push us closer to sort of our goal? And so, you know, there's scientific questions out there. Is metabolism likely to play a role in influencing this drug's response? You know, so does it make sense scientifically? In our case, we need access to patient samples. Are there patient samples available? Are there key stakeholders that like would be willing to work with us? You know, what's sort of the timeline that we might be able to have, you know, impact, right? So there's all these certain important kind of questions that we line up, and then we rub it against also the economics as well. Like if we developed a product, you know, how would it save money? How would it like improve outcomes? How would it do this so that it, again, allows us to keep that wheel kind of going of making these innovative products?
Yeah, and speaking so this kind of ties into the next question from Norman too. So basically, like there, you know, or his example is around COVID-19 patients. There's a lot of different applications and like creative approaches being talked about in various channels, including like some you know, some existing drugs, new drugs in development. There's steroids, you know, people are saying can be effective. How do you go about like tackling or is this an area that your platform could tie into and say basically this treatment is most effective for one patient versus another?
It's certainly something that we're thinking about and looking at of like how our tech could add value, you know. So still to be determined. I would say it's in that sort of decision matrix sort of opportunity right now, because actually like getting access to patient samples is not easy because everyone's just, you know, working so hard to treat them.
Right.
So actually doing research on them is a bit of a challenge, but there are efforts ongoing. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity. You know, we're fleshing it out like many leaders are in this space. You know, what I've been sort of encouraged by is that, you know, every scientist I know or business leader, you know, when this hit with the fury that it did, I think everybody, myself included, like looked at like, what can we do to help, right? From donating like our, you know, Qiagen PCR, you know, kits that we had in the lab to like seeing where our technology can add value. And those conversations are still ongoing. So Norman, I'll keep you posted.
Sounds good. Yeah, so looking or say 5 years from now, like looking back, what would make you think or what would make Olaris a success for you?
So jumping 5 years, is that's the dance we
Or
want to.
whatever time period, like just looking back on Olaris, what goals do you hope to hit with the company?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so I truly imagine, you know, a world where like, let's say like heaven forbid in the future, like I got diagnosed with cancer. Not great. But I hope, you know, we live in a world where my doctor can send like a blood sample to Olaris and we send back a report that says for Liz O'Day, this moment in time, here are the drugs most likely to benefit you, and here are the drugs least likely to benefit you. And that, you know, my doctor and I can come together to design, you know, the most optimal treatment for me. And then, you know, where I want it to go is not just that one test, but being able to monitor patients during their treatment so that we can always stay like one step ahead of the disease, you know. So again, cancer is an area that we're working on, but in other areas as well. But I get asked, you know, do you think we'll ever be able to cure cancer? And I say yes. But I think the definition of cure has evolved for me, you know, during my scientific career, where cancer is a tricky little minx, you know. It's like basically natural selection in a like little tumor. We're giving these drugs and we're forcing, you know, clones to escape and then create new tumors, and that's how, you know, recurrence and relapse happens. But we are also smart, and we have the technology to sort of detect and uncover those sorts of things. So when I think of curing cancer, I think about staying one step ahead of the disease. So being able to use like a Olaris tech to figure out what's the best treatment to start on, And then being able to, monitor yourself throughout the course of your treatment. So like when drug A stops working, sweet, let's switch it to drug B. And then, maybe for another person, instead of going A to B, they should go C to E, or whatever sort of the options are along those lines.
Great. Yeah, no, I mean, no, so that sounds great. Yeah, and basically, like, so there will be, I guess in that scenario, there'll be many different cures, but only one might work for each patient, and you'll be able to help figure out what that will be.
Yeah, it's moving towards,
Right.
personalized medicine and things like that, making it a reality.
Sounds perfect. Yeah, so I'd say, I guess, yeah, we're coming towards the end here. But yeah, I just definitely want to ask, like, a lot of our audience, either on the call or, that's going to view the recording afterwards, are entrepreneurs themselves. Like, what do you have, or what tips, do you wish somebody had told you, like, starting out on your startup, that an early stage company founders should think about, like, definitely doing and starting their own business?
Advice to budding entrepreneurs, I think is to stay the course. There will be a million people that will tell you no, or that you are not X, Y, or Z, not good enough, not smart enough, don't have enough data, whatever it will be. But if you have something that you believe in, to do the work to convince them, and be, maybe humble and open enough that, like, they don't need to believe you right away, like, well, that would be great, sure, I think it's maybe unlikely. And so to be determined in your cause, and to think about, yes, in 5 years, I want that product that I told you about, but where can I get in the next, 3, 6 months, 1 year, that will start positioning me towards that path, and just, maybe cutting all of ourselves some slack, that this is a process, it's a building process, and being able to kind of dissect it like that.
That's great advice. Yeah, and no, excited to, great questions from all the audience here, and great job. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on and telling everyone your story, and like, giving us hope for the future of medicine and all the innovation you guys are working on here. Yeah, I want to just let everyone know, like, we have a couple other startup grind events lined up as well. So feel free to check out our website. We have another fireside chat in about 2 weeks on basically how to write professionally for businesses. And then a couple weeks after that, we have our summer. I guess the links don't show up in the chat here. But yeah, we have and 2 weeks after that, we have our summer party. Now it's going to be virtual, so we're hosting a wine company, Archerus. We're going to have a larger networking session with, like, breakout rooms in there as well. But yeah, really want to give you another thank you for coming on and talking with all of us here today.
Oh no, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out, LinkedIn, Facebook, our website are great ways to sort of follow up. So thank you for that.
Sounds great. Yeah, and I'll share all of this, the YouTube on our Startup Grind channel as well. So if there's anything you missed you want to go back to, feel free to check it out there. And yeah, thanks again. And thanks everyone for joining and making this a great discussion.
Thanks, guys.